Hello and welcome to day 4 of our 12-day 6th grade math review. We're finishing up our very first week. We're continuing to walk through the 2017 STAR test in addition to some other videos that you have on my website, on my YouTube site, my playlist for 6th grade math to help you kind of get through some different concepts. So tonight we are going to start with multiplying by a fraction. And it can be kind of a unique concept because for the longest time, your teachers always said, whenever you multiply, you always get bigger. Whenever you add, you always get bigger. Well, you know that sometimes your addition comes up with something smaller because if you add a negative, it becomes smaller. Well, the same thing happens with multiplication. Your product always becomes bigger if you multiply whole numbers. But when you start multiplying fractions and start multiplying decimals, that's when things get a little weird. So what we have here is we've got 3 multiplied by 2/3. So we're going to say 3 multiplied by 2/3. And I want to show you, and they don't even want you to know what the answer is. They just want you to know, is it going to be between 3 and 4? Is the product going to be less than 2/3, between 2/3 and 3, or greater than 4? Well, let me draw a picture. So I'm going to represent this 3. I'm just going to represent this with 3 circles. So there we go. There's my 3 circles. And I want to take 2/3 of that. Well, I've got 3 circles, so each third is going to be 1. So if I were to take 2/3 of that, there's my 2/3. So I would say that 2/3 of 3, it looks like it's just going to be 2. Or if you flip it the other way, if you did repeated addition, if you did 2/3 times 3, because we can use the commutative property. The commutative property is sometimes called the order property. It just lets us flip the order of the factors if we're multiplying. It lets us flip the order of the addends if we're adding. And so we're going to flip this. We're going to say 2/3 times 3. That means there's 3 groups of 2/3, like it's repeated addition. So we're going to say 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3. Because you can say 3 groups of 2/3, it's going to be 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3. If you add all those together, you're going to get 6/3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So looking at it either way, whether you want to say 2/3 of 3 or 3 times 2/3, our answer is going to be C. It's going to be between 2/3 and 3. Because when you multiply a whole number, like 3, and you multiply a fraction with it that's less than 1, then the answer is going to end up being smaller than the whole number. Now, if you didn't want to draw any pictures, let me show you an easy way to multiply fractions. I'm sure you've learned from your teachers that whenever you add fractions, you always have to have the same denominator. Whenever you subtract fractions, you always have to have the same denominator. Multiplying fractions is beautiful because you don't have to worry about denominators at all. You simply multiply straight across. Now the problem is 2/3 times 3. Well, 3 is not a fraction. Any fraction or any whole number can be turned into a fraction by making it over 1. Because 3 is literally 3 ones. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. These are my ones. These are my wholes. And 3 is 3 wholes. So you can take any whole number, make that the numerator, slap a 1 underneath it as a denominator, now you have a fraction, and guess what? Multiplying straight across, it goes 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3. You don't worry about the denominators being the same or being different. You go straight across and you get 6/3. Now you are going to have to divide up to make that a mixed number, and in this case, 3 is going to go into 6 twice, so that's how we come up with 2. But if you didn't know that, you can draw some pictures and realize that if you take a whole number, multiply it by a fraction that's less than 1, your answer is going to end up being less than that whole number because you're not taking the entire whole number. You're only taking a part or a fraction of it. So that's the first problem for this evening. Let's take a look at our second one. It's going to make our eyes water a little bit. We need to come up with a value of -22, and you get all kinds of negatives and dividing and parentheses and all kinds of business. I would highly suggest slowing down on something like this. First, we're going to need to know our "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" order of operations, right? We're going to do our parentheses and then our exponents. Notice how I put the M and the D together. Even though when we're saying, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we have to put one word in front of the other. But multiplication and division are inverse operations. So if we come to a division first, we're going to do that before multiplication. Same with addition and subtraction. They're inverse operations, so you can come to either one first, left to right. So what we need to do is we need to slow down. We need to take each of these expressions over here, and we need to start breaking it down piece by piece. First, we're going to look at any of our parentheses. And so I've got a parentheses right here, and I've got a parentheses right here. Now, we don't have to do anything with this parentheses. It's just keeping the negative away from the division. So really, I'm not too worried about that parentheses. What I need to do is I just need to worry about this parentheses right here, right? We've got this 8 minus, and then the parentheses, the negative 3. So once again, this is kind of like this one over here. It's just wanting to keep the two negatives separated, because it would be really weird if you wrote 8 minus minus 3. That just looks kind of strange. So really, this parentheses is not multiplying by anything, or there's no operations within it. So we can just kind of ignore that parentheses right there, because all it's doing is just putting a little bit of space between this minus and this negative. So we don't have any exponents. So now what we're going to do is we are looking at our multiplication and division. And the first one we come to is right here, because this is just a minus next to a negative, and this is a division with a negative. So the first one's going to be division. We have 33 divided by 3. So 33 divided by 3 is 11. But since it's 33 divided by negative 3, this is a positive 33, and a positive and negative always mix together to make a negative. So this is 33 divided by negative 3 is going to end up being negative 11. So I'm going to recopy my 8 minus parentheses minus 3 plus, and now I've got this negative 11, so that's why the plus and negative, they look kind of strange. Let's just put a parentheses around that to kind of keep those separate. So now I've got a subtraction, and I've got an addition. And so I'm just going to go left to right. So I've got 8 minus negative 3, or 8 minus minus 3, right? And so a negative and a negative make a positive, because when you are taking away a negative, you're actually adding something. So these two make a positive. So 8 minus minus 3 is the same as 8 plus 3. Two negatives make a positive. So I'm going to take this 8 minus negative 3, and that's going to be 11. So all of this right here, I'm going to rewrite it down here as 11. And now I've got to rewrite what I have left, plus negative 11. Well, guess what? And so when you boil down to it, it's 11 minus 11. And that's just going to be 0. That doesn't get us anything that we need. So that's not going to work. So B is negative 3 plus negative 2. You see, we don't have any addition, or we don't have any multiplication or division. So really, we're just going to go left to right, because it's all adding or subtracting. So negative 3 plus negative 2. So that's going to just boil down to negative 5. And then now we need to minus negative 8. That's the next step there. And so remember, these two negatives are going to make a positive. So really, it's going to end up being plus 8. So negative 5 plus 8, that's going to boil down to a positive 3. And then we're just going to minus 1, because that's the final step right there. And so that's going to get us 2. So A equals 0 and B equals 2. Not quite what we're needing. So let's get rid of some of this here. And let's look at C. C does have multiplication, so we're going to need to start there first. Negative 6 times 2. So we're going to have to simplify that first. 6 times 2 is 12. So negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. And then we're going to do a minus negative 15. And remember, these two negatives, they're going to make a positive. So it's negative 12 plus 15. Well, that's going to get us 3. Still not what we need to. So let's hope it's D. And D is actually pretty simple. All we have is a multiplication to start with. Negative 5 times 2. Well, 5 times 2 is 10. So negative 5 times 2, since we have a negative positive, that's going to be negative 10 minus 12. And there we go. There's our negative 22. So our answer is going to be D. And so let's hide this and let's get into our final problem of the evening, and that is going to be this one right here. It is on the 2017. Nope, it's not that one. It is going to be number 6, and it's a whole lot of talking, but quite honestly, they give you half the work right here. You got a team of 167.3 hours. Took them that long to complete a task. A smaller team, it's going to take them 1.25 times as long. They give you the operation right there. It's multiplication. So you're not going to add. You're not going to add. It's either going to be H or J. And the question is simply, can you multiply 167.3 times 125? We'll do it the long way, and then I'll also give you a kind of a way to estimate it a little bit here. Notice when I wrote it down like this, I did not write down the decimal points. Don't put the decimal points when you're multiplying decimals. Ignore those for now. We'll get to those in a second. So this is just a regular multiplication. 5 times 3 is 15. 7 times 5 is 35. Add that 1 back in is 36. 5 times 6 is 30. Add the 3 back in, 33. 5 times 1 is 5. Add the 3 back in, 8. So there's your first row is 8, 3, 6, 5. Make sure to get rid of those. Your second row has a 0 because we're dealing with the tens place. So we want our first number to be in the tens place, not in the ones place. That's why we put a 0 there. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 7, 14. We're going to carry that 1. 2 times 6 is 12. Add that 1 back in, 13. And 2 times 1 is 2. Add that 1 back in, that's 3. Get rid of that. We're going to put 2 zeros here, simply because we're starting with the hundreds place now, and we want to start all of our work in the hundreds place, but it's just multiplying by 1, so you're just going to write your numbers straight down, 1763. You add it up, and then we're going to worry about our decimals. We'll get into our decimals in just a moment. Let's add these up. We got 19, 10, 20, boom, 209125. Now let's put our decimals back. That's where they started. We didn't need them when we were multiplying. Look at the factors. I've got 1, 2, 3 digits behind the decimal point in my factors, which means I need 1, 2, 3 digits behind the decimal in my product. So it's going to be 209.125. Now let's say you did not, so the answer is J. But you didn't want to do all of that work. How could you just estimate this? Well, if you take your 167.3, if you multiply it by 1, it's going to be 167.3. But then you multiply it by an extra 0.25. So 0.25 is 1/4, right? It's a quarter. So if I take my 167, that's about, let's call it 160. If I were to take a fourth of that, that's going to be 40. Because I know 4 times 4 is 16, so 4 times 40 is going to be 160. So if I wanted just to mentally add 40 to this, make sure we line up our decimals, it's going to get me 207.3, which is going to still be a lot closer to this one than it is that one. So if you wanted to just eyeball it, you could have equated that 0.25 with a quarter. You could have divided the 160 by 4, added that 40, and you could have got your answer there.